Welcome to the EAPTC podcast, where we dive into global discipleship by exploring faith, leadership, and life-changing stories. And each episode is dedicated to inspiring and equipping you with insights and wisdom to grow spiritually, lead effectively, and live purposefully as a committed follower and disciple of Jesus. Thank you for tuning in. Here is your host, Dr. Paul Sungro Lee.
Happy New Year, everybody. This is a time of the year when many people make some kind of New Year's resolutions. But as many people say, those resolutions do not often last. For example, I have seen many Christians who decide on New Year's Day to read one chapter a day in their Bible, only to fall off the wagon after just a few days. Today, I want to introduce a man whose commitment has endured in his lifetime discipleship to follow Christ. Not for a week, not for a year, but throughout his lifetime. He's an old friend. I first met him in the Philippines at the training institution where my wife Eunice and I have served for 7 years. When we arrived, we were told that there are another American couples coming to join us in our team in a week. And there he was. He and his wife, Amy, served with us on the same team for years after that. Eunice and I truly loved working and fellowshipping with them during our missionary tenure in the Philippines. Dr. Barber is a former missionary who recently retired after serving many years in Japan, also in New Zealand, and also in the Philippines. And he's married to Amy, has 3 grown children and 4 wonderful grandchildren as well. And he's joining us today from Columbia, South Carolina, I believe. So welcome to the podcast, Ron.
Hey, thank you, Paul. I'm glad for this opportunity to work with you and catch up with everybody.
It's my pleasure to have you on this podcast. It's such a joy to get to know you in the past and also know that you are back in the States so we can have this podcast today to bless our listeners. I know we have a lot of things to share and catch up together, but 37 years you said you've been serving as a missionary in different nations in the past. Am I correct?
That's right. We left in 1988.
Well, that's a long time.
Yes, it's a long time. So we went in 88. Both of Amy and I had been married for about 5 years at that point. And we left when we were 30 years old. And Amy was 3 months pregnant when we left. So
Wow.
we headed for Japan. I'd never been to Japan before. I couldn't speak Japanese. Like Toyota and Honda were like the only words I knew. Amy was an MK from Japan, but she left when she was 9 years old. So she had forgotten, her Japanese language, except for like kid phrases that you would learn. I had never been before. And we went with the intent to stay for our career. I know our generation thinks about career differently than the current generation, but I don't think that reflects necessarily a lack of commitment in today's generation. It's just a different understanding of what career is. But when we left, we went with an understanding of, this is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. We went to be church planters there. I was putting together some photos and prayer cards and prayer letters recently as we were reflecting on these 37 years and kind of putting together a history. And I came across a picture from the day we first left for Japan. And we left from the Columbia, South Carolina airport, and we were boarding this little 2-engine plane, a turboprop plane.
I remember that one.
Yeah, right. And they took you to a bigger airport, where you got on a bigger plane and went farther. But our journey to Japan begins on this little 2-prop airplane. And it was also back in the day where the people could still come to the gate, all the way to the departure gate and see you off. So we had family come. Amy's family and my family were there to see us off right at the departure gate. So the plane was like, just 20 yards away from the door. And when we left, the two of us, Amy and I, walked out towards the plane, and our family was back in the waiting room looking out these big windows. And there's a picture taken of us walking to the plane.
Wow.
And I remember at the time thinking, don't look back. I don't know exactly what was going on in my head, except that it wasn't like, okay, put your hand to the plow and don't look back. It wasn't that kind of uh, understanding of commitment, but it was you've decided to go in this direction, and you can't, like, that's, you're leaving that behind. And I
Mm,
think in my mind, um, that was kind of a physical expression of what we had already decided in our heart.
mm.
Looking back on it, perhaps I should have looked back. I don't know. But at any rate, that's just kind of like I said, maybe a physical expression of what we had already decided in our heart. So, um, but the commitment, when you're young, you're passionate, maybe, and you want to be committed, but it's easy for that passion to burn out. You wake up one day and the passion's gone, but your commitment better still be there, right?
Mm,
A little bit like marriage, I think.
right.
Before you get married, you're very excited and certainly have strong feelings and passion, and that's why you decide to get married. I want to be with you, but we don't understand what that's going to involve.
Mm,
We have plans and dreams, um, but man, you encounter some hard things that you didn't anticipate, and some things you'd rather not experience.
mm,
Hard times in marriage and relationship. And you can decide then, well, this is no longer fun. I don't have any passion anymore. This is getting old or boring or whatever, just hard, and decide to bail out. I was going to say commitment to the task, but I want to clarify that in just a minute.
mhm.
But I think it's a little bit like marriage, where as you're young, you have a passion, but not a great understanding of what that commitment might involve
Mm,
later on.
right. Mhm.
As the passion wears out, as it will, we can't maintain a 100-degree heat. You need to modulate
Right.
for the long term, I think. Otherwise, you do burn out. And I think what we had in the beginning was more of a conviction
Mm.
than a commitment. I would explain it in terms of conviction.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, a conviction of the truth. So there are lots of vocations in God's kingdom, right? There are lots of vocations. And
Mhm.
initially, my vocation out of college was as a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
I was a follower of Jesus. I talked to my friends about Jesus. I supported other people in the ministry, active in my church. I was following Jesus. I was where he wanted me to be, and that was my vocation in God's kingdom as a mechanical engineer. But he continued to lead us to a different vocation,
Mm.
and that is a full-time, what we'd call a vocational Christian service, maybe is the way to talk about that, or a missionary.
Right.
But there are lots of different vocations in God's kingdom, of course, and that was the one he led us first as an engineer, and then led me later as to be a church planter. But that call was progressive. Beginning as a child, even at our church had a strong emphasis on cross-cultural missions, and so I was exposed to that teaching and also to actual people who were doing this kind of work.
Mm.
So there was, somebody real that we could see. And just at various points in my life, God continued to make that call clearer. Um, and I guess it kind of culminated in a course I took that presented the Bible as an unfolding of God's plan. That
Mm.
God had an actual plan,
Right.
that he was moving toward a goal. And I got a big picture, and that it showed how Scripture explained that plan, and then pointed to what he was doing now and where he was going.
Mm.
That God was at work in the world, and that his goal was uh, the whole earth would be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the
Mm.
waters cover the sea.
Mhm.
And that's what he was doing. And he was doing it through people, through a certain kind of people who said yes to him. I will follow you. So it's a conviction of that truth that God's at work in the world. He works through people who say yes to him. So for us, it wasn't a commitment to a place, um, or to a particular ministry even, or even a vision, but to a person. And I think that's what has to carry you through, right? a commitment to the person of
Mm.
Jesus. Slogans and plans and campaigns come to an end, and they require energy and passion to pursue and complete. But the constant is the person, the relationship. And I think I mentioned marriage earlier. I think that is very similar, that our relationship with Jesus comes first as a foundation for this commitment, because
Mm.
you're gonna come up with some hard times and not fun times, right? But knowing the person uh, helps you get through that.
In fact, I had a very moving conversation with one of the candidates that I am kind of mentoring, and he was asking. In fact, he has a heart for South America, particularly Argentina, to go there in about few years and then start a ministry there and reach out to the people there. And somehow he was shaken with some doubt about whether he is really called to Argentina or maybe it's another place, or he was kind of confused and he was asking, so how do I confirm that I'm called to go to a certain place? That's what exactly what I told him. Our call is primarily not about the place, but about the person. It's not about Argentina, it's about your relationship with the Lord first. That counts most, which is going to show the way and navigate your path from that point on. So that's very important. You just mentioned. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with you that I mean, eventually you need to get the place, whether it's Columbia, South Carolina, where I am now, or whether it's Tokyo, Japan, or Manila, Philippines. You need a place, and you need a job. You need to, what has God called me to do here? As an engineer in upstate South Carolina, I knew what my everyday job was, and also knew what it meant to live as a Christian in that everyday job. And my everyday job changed, but I still had to be a Christian. I had to be a Jesus follower.
Mm,
Whether I'm a missionary or an engineer or whatever, you still follow Jesus.
exactly.
Um, yeah, so that's the important part. And if God has called you to, is leading you to a particular place, and fine, you need that place. You need to find out what that is. But that's direction, it's guidance. The relationship, though, is what has to be, as you said, the foundation for that guidance.
So my question is, Ron, how can somebody grow in their commitment level? Is there any way you can maybe give advice or
Well,
suggestions in this regard?
our experience was that as you encounter difficulties and you turn, what are you going to do? Do you turn to God, or do you lean on your
Mm,
own
mm,
resources, right?
right.
And you turn to God, and He brings you through. And you have that then as a history, right? A history lesson. Okay, so God has taken us through this. And so when you encounter the next difficulty or the next victory, whichever, it's still, okay, God did this. God is with us. And that's the difference. If you start trying to figure it out on your own, or just handle it on your own,
Mm,
you're going to, some people do better than others because some people are smarter and better equipped and more emotionally stable. And, the human resources differ between people, but you'll never make it
mm,
just with depending on yourself. So God gives us those opportunities, gave us opportunities like that, and you trust and obey in the moment, and then you build the history.
mm,
You're able to what raise your Ebenezer, right? Up to this point, God has been a help,
yes.
and that provides the way forward. And Amy and I got the question, tell about a time we almost quit. And we
Oh,
looked at each other and we discussed it, and it's like, we never really had a time where we felt like, let's quit.
mm, mm,
We never had that time where we considered just laying it down, putting it away, and walking off. Um, which is not to say that we didn't encounter difficulties, right? I mean,
right.
oh my, oh my, you go through that long of ministry, you go through that long of life, and you have difficulties. But we never considered quitting. I considered leaving our particular mission at one point. I felt we were changing our ministry from church planting to seminary, teaching in a seminary. We had several setbacks in our the support and understanding of our mission about what we were trying to do, and that was very discouraging. And so we almost quit our particular agency, but we never considered dropping out of the whole ministry, and leaving God behind and doing something else. Yeah, I mean, we had friends. One of our best friends in Japan, they had 4 children, 2 of them with special needs,
Mhm.
and man, to live life every day took a tremendous amount of energy from both of them, with their 4 kids.
Mm.
But they never left. In fact, they lobbied to stay. We need to stay in Japan. What has changed? God hasn't changed our call. And so just because we have these 4 kids and the way they are, that God hasn't changed. He wants us here. And they were very fruitful missionaries. We had another friend. Her husband had a stroke walking away to the train station one day, and he couldn't talk. He had trouble walking, and okay, maybe they should go back to the U.S. No, they said they lobbied to stay. Um, what has changed? Well, he's not as able to carry on a ministry as he was, but God still wants us here. So they were committed and in difficulty. So you encounter these kinds of difficulties, right? And man,
Mm.
Japan is not a very fruitful field yet. We still pray for the day that God will break through, but right now it's not a very fruitful place. And you compare the work that you put in with the results that you get out, and it's very discouraging. Can be very discouraging. Um, so that's a challenge to persevere in the face of um, not not a lot of results. The average size of church in Japan is about 35. And in the Philippines, it's just seems easier to gather a group of people and get that
Mm.
church started. So there's a difference, obviously, which is not to say that planting churches in the Philippines is easy, but you see very different results as far as numerical results. So that's a challenge to stay focused, to stay committed to being faithful without giving up, right?
Mm.
You want to be faithful and not give up.
Yeah, what you just said is very pinpointing. Whatever happens, we stick to the one who has called us, and
Yeah.
that will give us enough strength to go through each and every different types of challenges that is ahead of us. And in fact, Jesus never promised any easy life for us, but he said, "Take cheer, you will overcome the world as I have overcome the world." I'm sure you've shared a lot of stories here and there, but what was the greatest challenge? And also, can
Uh,
you share maybe what was the greatest joy? I have some hunch, but I want to hear from your own mouth. And maybe you can just share some stories about those areas. I know if you have a lot of those, but just give us what was the greatest challenge and greatest joy?
Learning the language, finding a place to meet. We couldn't find anywhere to meet, to rent a place to meet for the first church we were trying to get started. And ended up going away, spending a day in prayer and fasting. And when I got back home, Amy said that one of the people who were helping us look had called the realtor that we had been in contact with before and had said no, they weren't going to work with us, had changed their mind, and now we were able to, God just opened the door and we were able to rent this place that we had our eye on from the beginning.
Mm.
So that was a challenge, very, set us off several months from when we anticipated starting. But to say that was the greatest, that was a challenge on the way that was certainly big at the time. Couldn't move forward without that, it seemed. But in retrospect, kind of a bump on the way. So really challenges, man. Paul, I don't. I, I had trouble coming up with something that just was overwhelming that we couldn't, that we felt like this is going to do us in. But
Mm.
joys, I have good joys.
I'm
Joy
sure.
thing. As well as I do, working with students, when you see um, true understanding take place that results in life change, right? I mean, they don't just get the notes. They don't just listen to the lecture or participate in a discussion. They get it, and they turn a corner, right? And different analogies, the light bulb comes on or whatever,
Right.
and to see then that they've changed the way they approach their ministry because of their encounter with the course material and the interaction. I think that's the greatest joy for teaching. One example, a student from a I don't know if I'm allowed to say country names here, and
You don't have to. Yeah.
yeah, okay, all right, I'll skip that. So this student came to IGSL, and his background was his family was Christian, but years ago they had a land dispute. His larger family had a land dispute, and they had taken the land away from the family. But they said the authority said that they would give the land back to the family if they would convert from Christianity to Islam. And his uncle said, okay, that he would do that, but his mother refused to do that. And shortly after that, his mother was killed. They don't know the circumstances. And so he was sent to stay with relatives. Eventually, though, he stayed a Christian and eventually made his way to IGSL he had been a pastor, and he'd come to study more at IGSL and the school that we taught in at the Philippines. And he took a course that I taught on contextualization and how culture makes a difference and how we need to be sensitive to others. How, as Paul says, I became all things to all that I might win some. Of course, that has limitations and conditions, but that's a change in heart attitude. And so he had been telling his uncle, who had become the imam in the local mosque, he said, "You need to come to my church and become a Christian." And of course, that's impossible for his uncle to do. But then after he had done some reading in the course and participated, he had a change of heart. And he called his uncle and he said, "You don't have to come to my church. You can follow Jesus right where you are." And and his uncle said, "Well, in the past you've been saying one thing and now you're saying another thing. What changed?" And he said, "Well, Jesus has changed my heart, and I understand that it's not about me, it's about you. And I want you to come to know Jesus, but you don't have to come to my church." That's an extra condition that is not, you don't need to meet. You just need to meet Jesus. And so his uncle was surprised. And then his uncle, as they talked, his uncle said, "You said that Jesus will forgive our sins. Is that true?" And he said, "Yes, that's true." And he said, "If I tell you something, will you keep it a secret?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Actually, it was I who killed your mother." And and that was, of course, quite a shock to the student. And he paused and he said, "Well, if you had said this some years ago, I wouldn't forgive you. But now I can forgive you because Jesus has changed my heart. You think this is a big thing, that is that I forgive you for this, but God has forgiven me, and that's the big thing. This is God. God can forgive all things, and because He has forgiven me, I can forgive you." So they talked more about this, and his uncle eventually said, "Okay, I'm gonna. If this is where true love is, and I want to follow this God, but
Wow.
I still have to be in the mosque because if I leave, then people will threaten my family, and I have other children here." And our student said, "That's okay. You follow Jesus, and He'll tell you what to do next." And that was the change of heart. See, the student had been setting conditions on, this is how you become a Christian. You have to do this, 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 and this, and then you can become a Christian. But now he had changed and said, "You follow Jesus first and listen to him and see what he tells you to do."
Exactly.
Yeah. So they talked again, and his uncle had left the mosque. And people were wondering why, but he left. And then he started a Bible study in his home, the uncle did. And for interested family members, kept it kind of quiet, right? Because it couldn't go, but they were curious why. And so he's
Mm,
explaining why. The student returned home for a short time and was able to help the uncle understand more. His other relatives have begun in a different town to also show interest, and he's talked to them. Of course, we don't want to leave the uncle in the mosque, right? We
mm,
don't want to leave him there. Uh, but so the journey doesn't end there, but the journey has to start there. And that's what our student learned, that it didn't start in his church where
mm,
the uncle had to leave everything right away and come to the church. But it started where he was, and he had to listen to Jesus there. And
mm.
Jesus will get him out. He'll get him out of the mosque, and he'll get him into a fellowship, and he'll work that way. But the student's heart changed because he understood about forgiveness, of
Mm,
course, and meeting the people where they were in order to bring them forward and not demanding the other conditions first.
mm.
So you get that kind of change of heart. He said, I had always witnessed to Muslims, but as my enemy, I felt obligated. I had to. And now I want, I see the need and I want to tell them about Jesus
Mm.
instead of an obligation. That kind of change, I think, is significant.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I believe you were attracted to the International Graduate School of Leadership, where we taught together as a team, even same thing for me and my wife, Eunice.
Yes,
It was such a place where you could actually meet the students and church leaders and Christian leaders from different parts of the world, particularly where there are persecutions and harassment to follow Jesus is
yes.
currently going on. And it was our privilege to serve those students, particularly from those areas, and also help them to be equipped further to go back and serve Jesus in the places that it is hard to get in as a foreign missionary and also penetrate with the gospel. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I am with you wholeheartedly. I even today pray that God will strengthen those who are serving the Lord and following Jesus in the persecuted area and let them move on another day with the strength from heaven above. It is not easy to serve Christ and follow Jesus in such places.
They change their perspective on what is important. It changes from a self-focus to an other focus.
Mm,
You think, how can you do ministry when you're self-focused? But if you put the other person first and begin to try to think, how are they thinking? Then perhaps that changes the way you go about evangelizing and presenting the gospel. Instead of a one-way fits all, maybe you change that. Or discipleship, how do you build that relationship? Instead of a canned presentation that goes one way, maybe you'd want to find out where they're coming from and I get that perspective. And I had many students change that to what do they need to hear. Um, and I think it changes your ministry approach.
right. Well, I'm so happy to talk with you, Ron, about what the Lord has done in your life to help those who are listening out there and also kind of wondering and navigating through their own life here in the United States with different types of challenges. You know, we have another types of challenges we face right here in the US, and
Yeah.
many Christians are also going through depressions or temptations and, you know, any kind of troubles that they are trying to overcome day by day. And I'm sure the same answer is right there in Jesus. Jesus gives us a strength, whether we live in a persecuted world or in a free world like where we are today. Jesus is our strength and he's a source of our energy and day by day solution, I believe. And thank you for sharing those encouraging stories. Any
Sure.
final thoughts you want to add on what we have already discussed? I know it's been such a wonderful time, but because of time and space
Sure.
limited, would you share maybe your final thoughts?
Um, Amy and I were reflecting on these 37 years and like trying to evaluate. And of course, you have some regrets. We try not to focus too much on that. We like, but okay, we could have done that better. I wish we had that happen, but you can't. Amy says there's no woulda, coulda, shoulda. This is where we are today. And God has been faithful. So we rejoice in that. But I think I'll mention just three things that kind of reflecting, looking back, things that I might have done differently. I think I would have, and I hesitate to say this, but I think I would have given more time to family. Um,
Mm,
I know for some it's the opposite, that family becomes an idol, and you leave a ministry to take care of family, or and we have great passages of, if you don't hate your mother and father, you can't follow me. And we have these passages that would reinforce turning your back on your family, or the opposite, that we're tempted these days. Our culture tells us, family is supreme. But I think for me, it would have been better if I had given a little bit more time to family, my wife and three children, as well as my parents. Um, I was busy and focused, and I think I should have been a little bit more sensitive to family, especially my parents. Um, yeah, so that's the one thing. The second thing is I wish I had listened to my wife more. Amy is a wise person and loves Jesus, and I wish I had listened to her more, um, especially regarding family matters, but also for ministry. I go to her even today for help in ministry matters, of course. So I wish I had been less independent and more open to what she was saying. And finally, the last thing is I wish I had invested better in individuals.
mm,
I'm not good at that. My personality is not that way. My gifting is not particularly that way. But I wish I had seen the importance. I knew theoretically, but I didn't make a significant effort to make that a priority. And I wish I had invested in individuals,
mm.
particulars, identified people in the church, in the um, schools that I taught in, and worked more to help individuals. Um, I did more toward the end of our time with IGSL. Was able to, I feel like, leave. And I'm not talking about mentoring. If mentoring's your thing, do the mentoring thing. I'm not talking about that so much as investing, encouraging, identifying people that you feel like God's hand is on, and encouraging them to mobilize those gifts and utilize those gifts and see what God has for them. Again, I'm not strong in that area. I just am not bent that way. I don't, but that is mentoring and having, everyday contact. I'm not good at that. But I wish I had been better at investing in individuals over the course of our ministry.
Well, thank you for sharing such honest feedback, Ron. I know it's not easy to share some of the things you've just shared, but I really appreciate it. And I pray and hope that some of those who are listening to this podcast will catch it and maybe apply it to their own life, and also learn from a man who has spent his entire life to follow Christ, and he's giving us some great suggestions about what to do better for ourselves. I trust and pray this conversation will encourage our listeners to follow Christ more closely and deepen their commitment to his lordship. Ron, thank you so much for joining me today. Your insights and experience with the nations of the world and people out there truly blesses me, and I'm sure even everybody listening today. May the Lord keep you and Amy and guide your steps as you enter into the new stage of life, continuing to follow Christ.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a privilege today. Thank you very much.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us today for this episode. Please don't forget to follow the podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Once again, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time.
Looking to grow as a disciple maker and leader? EAPTC Academy offers practical, hands-on discipleship training to equip you for Christian ministry and missions. With a 9-month program and flexible study options, you'll receive first-hand guidance to fulfill the Great Commission. With a global reach and multilingual courses, the Academy partners with churches to empower individuals to live out the Great Commission. Whether through guided cohorts or independent study, EAPTC Academy prepares you for impactful ministry. Visit eaptc.online to learn more.
Thank you for being part of the EAPTC global family. United, we can reach every life, every community, and every nation for the glory of God.